Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more history matters. It's been a hot minute, and this time we are tackling the question of why didn't the USA annex all of Mexico in 1848? Short animated documentary. Before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you join the Discord and follow me over at Twitch. Also, please do go check out my gaming channel here on YouTube, where I'm uploading old stream videos, old streams, and dumb clips. Now before we dive in, let's think about this question for a second. Um, I do remember a video we watched very early on in the lifetime of this channel. It might have been within the first month, I think. Um, a video on the Mexican-American War, and I think essentially the answer was there wasn't really much. The U.S. didn't have much use for the land south of the Rio Grande. Um, there really isn't, like, it would have been more costly to take it, like, than what they could have gained from it, you know? No real point in the stuff south of the Rio Grande. And also by stopping at the Rio Grande, what you do is that land in the north of Mexico is is a very sparsely populated sort of land, deserty kind of place. So you are keeping, Mexican population centers away from the border with the USA. So it's easier to defend. And also, stopping at a river, rivers make things easier to defend, though not so much these days because of technology. But back then, right?
In 1848,
Dive in.
after defeating Mexico in a war, the United States annexed these territories from it. And there were many notable individuals in the US that weren't happy at simply taking these lands. In fact, they wanted to manifest destiny the entirety of Mexico. Of course, they never did, but given how thoroughly the US won the war, this does raise a question. Why didn't the US take all of Mexico? So the war started after the US annexed Texas, and the new borders between the United States and Mexico became unclear. The Texans, and thus now the Americans, claimed the border to be here, whereas the Mexicans said it was here. Both sent troops, and after a small skirmish, the US declared war. The Americans won the war handily, and so when it was time to make peace, President James K. Polk had a dilemma. Just how much land should they take? Polk had been elected on a promise to expand the United States territorially. The war with Mexico had been contentious domestically, and there were several areas of disagreement. The first was slavery. Mexico had abolished slavery over a decade before the war. But if territory was taken from it, then its status as either a slave state or a free state wouldn't be clear. Those in the South wanted a place for the practice to expand to, and if all of Mexico could be turned into slave states, then its future would be secure.
Yeah.
Polk was himself pro-slavery, but given that his party had just lost the midterms and the House was now controlled by the Whig Party, he had to compromise. The second issue was that Mexicans were seen as different.
Dear God.
There were many US politicians who worried about a sudden influx of Spanish-speaking non-white Catholics upsetting life there. The third issue was one of practicality. Polk had promised a quick war against an inferior enemy which would give Americans lots of free land. As the war had dragged on and American troops had to move further and further into Mexico, even occupying its capital, this was no longer the case. As such, incorporating all of Mexico would have led to a long and expensive guerrilla war. Those on the opposing side, including future President James, I guess it's okay if you secede Buchanan, wanted all of Mexico. Their arguments were that the US could handle any insurgency similarly to how they had handled the Native Americans before this. They also argued that all of Mexico should be annexed on financial grounds. Mexico's northern territories were somewhat barren, whereas the south was much more arable and would allow the US Navy access to southern ports, further expanding its reach. It was also believed that annexing all of Mexico would make up for the cost of the war. So why did the lesser annexation plans win out? Well, it was mostly down to a man called Nicholas Trist. Trist was sent to negotiate a peace settlement, and Polk had ordered him to obtain these territories. Trist was largely seen as being too pro-Mexican by the army, and so Polk fired him.
Dear Nikki, you resign. Best wishes in this trying time, J.K. Polk.
The problem was that Trist simply ignored him, and then negotiated a lesser settlement anyway. He did this because he opposed the war and didn't believe that America could be both a republic and an empire. He presented this lesser treaty to...
Oh, wow. A man like that living in America in the mid-19th century? Tell me more about him. Is he a good guy, or is he actually a piece of shit? Like, does he have some things that make him a piece of shit? Or is he actually one of those rare good people?
To an unhappy president who just wanted everything over with at this point. Polk had hoped that this lesser treaty would be signed off by a hostile house. This worked, and despite most Americans actually wanting more of, but not all of Mexico, America only annexed this. I hope you enjoyed this.
Okay, so I was a little bit wrong, but kind of right at the same time. but yeah, the economic thing definitely makes a lot of sense. Um, okay, this was pretty good. They've squeezed in quite a lot here in 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Um, I don't think it's their strongest. Don't think it's anywhere close to their weakest. This was a good video. They fit in a good bit of context. I think the best they fit in as much as I think they could in 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Whoa, ambulance, hello, goodbye. Um, uh, yeah, I think this was pretty good. Um, it answered the question. They answered the question pretty well. I think they could have spent more time on the why they didn't. They spent about half the video, a little over half the video, talking about like the amount of people in the US government that were wanting to annex more of Mexico, and then spent like the last, what, 40 seconds to a minute talking about the why it didn't happen. I think they could have expanded a bit more on how that all went down. I think that would have been nice, but for the length of this video, I think they did a pretty damn good job. I hope you guys enjoyed as well. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe. Subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.